Welcome back to the next lesson in blend modes. As you can see, our shadows are still evident from the last lesson, and we're ready to move on to highlights. The first thing we need to do is make a new layer, which I've already done, on top of my shadows layer, and named it highlights. This layer needs to have a clipping mask like the shadows layer did. It also needs to be set to the screen mode on our layers menu. Adding highlights will work a lot like adding the shadows, except you really have to be careful with how you add highlights into your composition. What I mean by that is I'm going to sample this color here, which is the skin color. Go into my brush menu. I'm going to choose a soft round brush, set it to normal mode. If we do double screen, it'll be a little bit much. And I'm going to set the opacity at about 40%. Using too much light can really distract and really kind of wash out a composition. So you really want to be careful when you add light to a piece of work. You can already see the white lines overtaking the black lines on the outside of the hand, and if we do too much of that, or if I let up my pen stroke and I do a double layer, that could start to turn really white and really not accomplish what we want in this composition. What I'm going to do with the hand here is I'm going to kind of keep my pen stroke on the tablet, and I'm going to kind of make sure I get a nice little circle here. We'll kind of come back to this here in a little bit as well. I'm going to do too much on the hand. Okay, I'm going to come down to his lower hand. And remember, our book is the focal point of the light, so his right side, from our perspective, right side of his hand here is going to have a little bit more highlight. The thing that differs in this lesson from the shadows lesson is that we're not going to stick with this one color as we move along. We're going to have to resample. So I'm going to resample this blue, and I'm going to take the opacity back up to 100%. You really only need the 40% when you're dealing with the skin color, or else you're going to get really white. So I'm going to come in here, make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm going to start just stroking in some light right here. Sample that darker blue. Kind of do the same thing. Move down to the purple. Feel free in this section to turn your button on that will allow you to have more control over your flow. So the lighter you press, the shorter and smaller your cursor size will be, and just kind of play with the strokes as you get into this area here. Because remember, there's no right or wrong way to do this shadowing and this highlighting. It's just kind of a personal preference. I'm just going to kind of make it look a little bit like the book is emanating its light, and the folds and the close here may be blocking just a little bit of it as it gets kind of past this fold in the close here. So the only other thing on the highlights I may do is to come into this blue area and kind of come in here like this. Just do some outlines around this side. I'm going to refrain from doing any highlights on the left arm because the left arm is going to be using the highlights that we put into the book, and I'm going to do those now. I'm going to choose a green color for my book highlight, kind of a darker green. And actually, you know what, before we do that, let's go ahead and make a new layer for later. And let's choose our green. Make sure that we're using our soft round brush still. And I'm just going to make my brush bigger. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to emit a little glow from the book. Now this glow can be anything that you want it to be, any color that you want it to be. But you want to make sure that you're happy with your glow before you get into the next few steps, because this is going to determine how we proceed from here. Okay, I'm happy with that. And now what I'm going to do is zoom into that hand we talked about just a moment ago. And I'm just going to come in with that same brush and I'm just going to start laying in some very basic, very simple little outlines on the fingers. Now we are going to touch this up. We're going to go back over this area again later in a future lesson when we get into the finer details. So for right now I'm just going to put a little bit in here, not too much. We don't want to get carried away too soon. And then what I may do is come up here, add a little bit of green here. And again, this is another area that we'll come in and touch up later. You really want to make it clear where that light source is coming from and what is causing it. And we know now that it's, of course, the book. We know that it has got some kind of evil green light emanating from it. For what purpose, we're not sure yet. But we know that is definitely the focal point. Okay, so in this lesson we've come in, we've added a little bit of light to the right hand side, which I'm actually going to go over again with that green. And we've added some values to the hand. We've added some values and green color to the book and to the right hand. And we've kind of made our very basic highlights. Mentioned before, we will touch these up in a future lesson. So I'm going to, one last thing before we go, I'm going to take this back down to 40% to match that kind of flesh color we had earlier. Just kind of drawing on top of it so as to not kind of overpower it. And we'll call it good there. And in the next lesson, we will start drawing our energy beams coming out of the book. We'll see you then.